Morning, everyone. Welcome to Saturday morning literature session. And this morning we're going to be discussing the poem, The Pineapple and the Bee. So some of you would have already covered this poem in some of the classes during the week. And for those who haven't, and for those who have, we're just going to examine these concepts presented in the poem in a little bit more detail, try and unearth some understanding. Once again, the poems are from the book Select English Poems by A. Parthasarathi, which are not his own poems. It's just a collection of poems that he has collected over a number of years and presented in a book. These poems all have a value or have an idea or a concept that we are trying to understand or pursue. So the poem chosen today is a poem by William Cowper called The Pineapple and the Bee. So we'll read through the poem and then we'll discuss the poem further. The Pineapple and the Bee. The pineapples in triple row were basking hot and all in blow. A bee of most discerning taste perceived the fragrance as he passed. On eager wing the spoiler came and searched for crannies in the frame. Urged his attempt on every side, to every pane his trunk applied. But still in vain, the frame was tight and only pervious to the light. Thus having wasted half the day, he trimmed his flight another way. Methinks, I said, in thee I find the sin and madness of mankind. To joys forbidden man aspires, consumes his soul with vain desires. Folly the spring of his pursuit, and disappointment all the fruit. While Cynthia ogles as she passes, the nymph between two chariot glasses. She is the pineapple, and he the silly, unsuccessful bee. The maid who views with pensive air the show glass fraught with glittering ware, sees watches, bracelets, rings and lockets, but sighs at the thought of empty pockets. Like thine her appetite is keen, but the cruel glass between. Our dear delights are often such, exposed to view, but not to touch. The sight our foolish heart inflames, we long for pineapples in frames. With hopeless wish one looks and lingers, one breaks the glass and cuts his fingers. But dame whom truth and wisdom lead, can gather honey from a weed. William Cowper. So, the poem. Any ideas, first of all, what the poem is trying to convey? What message do you draw from the poem? Anyone? Okay, so what is it? Yeah. Yes.
I was going to say maybe the pointless pursuit of our desires always. Even if we get them, there's just another one. We'll find something else behind the glass or something else we can't attain and think, well, when I get that, then I'll be happy.
Correct.
So just something we can't get, or just finding a new one even once we get that, this ridiculous sort of wheel.
Great. So that's correct. So that's investigating or highlighting one of the aspects of desires, the very nature of desires? Yes, Brenda.
Craig, I'm thinking that possibly we are tempted or we trying to grasp what is unattainable to us. And what he's saying is that if we look at the simple things, they are available to us, but it doesn't seem as though we want them. We are now pursuing things that are either forbidden or unavailable to us. That's the idea that I'm getting, but yet we can find those pleasures in things that are close to us and around us, simple things. I'm not sure if that's...
Okay, great. Yeah, so we tend to pursue those things forbidden to us,
yes,
that are not meant for us. Yeah, that's
unavailable.
Unavailable in a way, or forbidden. I think the words he uses in the commentary is forbidden.
Yeah.
In other words, the pineapples are not meant for the bee, in a sense.
Yes.
But yeah, no, these are both great, valuable contributions, and definitely highlight aspects of the poem that we are going to further discuss. So that's great. Thanks, guys. So if we look at the poem as such, what we see is that the poet draws a parallel. He's drawing a parallel between the bee and the human being. Now, he draws this parallel to the human fallacy. And that fallacy is this nature of desires and the ability of the pursuit of desires to provide us a sense of happiness and well-being. So in the poem, he quite explicitly says there, a little further down, he refers to the sin and madness of mankind. Now, when we talk about sin, you may have a certain idea of what sin means. But for the purpose of our discussion, sin is nothing but a mental agitation. When you perform a sin, you are agitated by that action. So in that sense, it is an incorrect action or a wrong action. This is sin. This is a common definition of sin. So sin is not some action that is imposed upon an individual. It is a subjective experience. So you are sinning when you yourself perform an action that you yourself later deem or presently deem as being wrong. And there are many examples, and why I say subjective, because it is a subjective feeling that we experience having done something we ourselves deem as being incorrect. So a sin may occur to me, or a sin may arise in my mind, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Another person could quite easily, happily be doing it and not feel any mental agitation. So therefore, that person is not sinning, typically. So sin is not a set of rules or a set of do's and do nots. This is often our association with sin. No, there's a list of commandments, or there's a rule book set out, and if you do this, then you're okay, but if you do that, then you're sinning. It's not like that. The whole thing is a subjective experience. So usually what we find happening is that a person who has elevated himself in knowledge will see certain things as a wrong approach. It's not to say that he sits there in judgment. He just views things from a different perspective. A person that lacks knowledge, he may think it's all right to do certain things. He doesn't see anything wrong in them. Now, we can condone his actions because for him, there's no mental agitations associated with his activity. He doesn't feel that pinch, as it were. So this is important to understand, the sin and madness of mankind. And we get into this idea of sin and why it creates this mental agitation. The other thing is madness. Now, madness is easily defined. I'm sure many of you know what the definition of madness is. Well, there are many, but any idea? I don't know who defines it, but it's somewhere it's defined as doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So doing the same thing, expecting a different result. The way the author describes it in the commentary of the poems in the book is he calls it a sense of intellectual poverty. So there is a wrong knowledge or wrong understanding. So this idea of intellectual poverty he refers to as madness. So what we have to examine, and especially what's going on in the poem here, is that the bee, if we go to the first stanza, the bee, the pineapples in triple row were basking hot and all in blow. A bee of most discerning taste perceived the fragrance as he passed. Triple row, the pineapples in triple row. What does this refer to? Those who've done the poem can't answer, right?
Is it mind, body, intellect?
Correct. The desires pertaining to the three levels of our personality. So often we think, okay, the desires stem from the mind. Correct. We understand that. We appreciate that much at this point in the study. But we have desires. We have desires at the physical level. We want to satiate our sensual indulgences. We want to contact the sense objects. These are physical desires. It may be desire for something of a material nature, to obtain objects of the world. These are referred to as physical desires, or material desires, should I say. Then we have mental desires. So we want our emotions to be catered to. We desire a feeling of happiness, a feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of being appreciated, a sense of self-worth, well-being. So we have these desires playing out at the mental level. Then at the intellectual level, the same thing. The desire for knowledge, the desire to know certain things, the desire to be able to intellectually analyze and work something out. These pertain to desires at the intellectual level. So these triple rows are not that if he didn't have any idea, why would he say triple row? Triple row, three, always in three, body, mind, intellect. He could have easily said double row or quadruple row or more. Specifically chose the word triple row. So these desires are there within us. But what's interesting is the sense objects are also there external to us. So the bee, he simply passes and he gets a smell. He gains a perception. There's a stimuli, and that is the pineapples. This is the stimuli, the smell of the pineapples. And he perceives that. There's a perception, which is one of the senses, is smell. So he perceives that smell as he goes past. This is happening to us all the time. See, from the moment you wake up, you open your eyes, and you're susceptible to stimuli via your eyes. Ears always open. Nose is always open. Even with a mask, you can still smell. Tongue, okay, that to an extent, you're not walking around with your tongue like a dog, you know. So tongue, at least, there's some form of control. Touch, yes, you can social distance. Nobody should touch me, and I shouldn't touch anyone. So in a lot of the cases, we are always susceptible to the influx of these stimuli. Stimuli are always coming in or have the potential to reach us. Now, this is exactly what happens in the bee's case. The stimuli are coming in, the stimuli are entering, and the bee perceives them as he passed. This is where the bee makes a mistake. And when I say this is where the bee makes a mistake, this is where we make the mistake. Now, just because the stimuli we are interacting with the stimuli, that doesn't mean we need to contact everything that comes in our path. Everything that comes in our path is not always meant for us, just as the bee. So he says, on eager wing the spoiler came and searched for cannons in the frame, urged his attempt on every side, to every pane his trunk applied. So now this bee, he gets the scent and he goes towards the pineapples. Pineapples are not meant for the bee, just as certain things are not meant for us. But his actions are directed at trying to attain those desires. So he spends a great amount of time and effort in trying to attain those desires. Why do we pursue desires in the world? This is the question. See, if some of you may be familiar with this chronology of action, you understand that the vasanas produce thought, the thought produces desire, and the desire produces action. Now, if that's the case, then the question is easy. Well, what causes you to act in the world? And you will turn around and say, desires. Desires propel me to act in the world. This is the chronology of action. But essentially, what is the fundamental reason that we act in the world? Why do we act? To find happiness. Correct. Exactly. Correct. That's one of the things we act for, because we believe that action will provide some sort of result. We act in the intention of gaining some result from that action. What is the result from that action? We're hoping it'll provide a sense of happiness. So we act. I get up and make myself a cup of coffee because I believe that coffee will give me a sense of happiness. Why do I go out and exercise? Because it gives me a sense of well-being, a sense of satisfaction, a sense of achievement, all leading to a sense of happiness, peace within. So if we look at and this is in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, he talks about different types of actions. Now, one of those types of actions that he refers to is obligations, obligatory actions. Those actions that we have to do in order to maintain a healthy relationship with the world, or a sense of our own psychological well-being. So these obligations, and obligations are often, there's a connotation with obligations of a negative connotation. Excuse me. So they often have this negative connotation. I have these obligations that are imposed upon me and I have to perform them, and they become a drudgery. This is not what obligations are about. Obligations are for us to set up a sense of well-being for ourselves. We perform an obligation. So take, for example, exercise. We understand the value of having a physical body, a body that is physically fit and healthy. So our obligation then becomes to make sure that we maintain this level of fitness. So we go out and we exercise, not with a drudgery, not with a burden, but actually you go out because you understand that for me to fulfill this obligation to myself, I will need to perform these various actions. So this is one type of action, is these obligations in the world. In the Gita, the next type of action he refers to is those actions which are forbidden, not allowed to do them. And it is quite extreme, the actions he goes through. He mentions there theft and things that all of us would potentially consider as wrong. We would, everyone has some, even if your moral compass is slightly skewed, each one of us will have a moral compass that in some way would lead us to a relative right and wrong. Everyone knows, okay, it's not good to murder someone. It's not good to steal. These things, these are what he refers to as forbidden. But actually what it boils down to is one's own conscience. See, as soon as you do something forbidden, the conscience pricks. This can be linked to that sin, that mental agitation, which he speaks about, the sin and madness of mankind. And then we find the third type of action is in between these two. So it's neither here nor there. It's neither an obligation, nor is it a forbidden action. Now, what happens in these two extremes, obligation and forbidden, is that because of the paucity of the intellect, what happens is it becomes difficult to discern the difference between the two. We're not sure what is obligation, what is forbidden, what to do. So often the things that we desire are not appropriate for us. This is where the intellect comes in. Okay, this is something, and this is an example that is often used. In fact, this is highlighted in the commandments, I think it is, or even the Bible mentions this. Do not covet another man's wealth. Do not covet another man's wife. These are commandments or verses, scriptures, essentially. Now, what does this mean? What they're saying is, do not desire things that are not for you. You may be sitting there and your neighbor has got a nice house, nice car, and you're thinking to yourself, why is this guy, he's got so much of money, you know? You should maybe hand some of that out. You're thinking on his wealth. You're wanting his wealth. Like you pass a bank. Oh, so much money is in that bank. What about some for me? So this is coveting another's wealth. Coveting is this constant thought going towards another person's wealth. Or it could be wife. You are outside on your patio and you look over and there's a beautiful woman or a beautiful man next door. Oh, and the thought pricks. Oh, she's nice. Do not covet another man's wife. Now, what happens is those things are obvious. They're forbidden. Another man's wealth, another man's wife, got nothing to do with me. But when this paucity of the intellect is there, we understand the mind takes over. And this is coming to the point that you raised in the beginning, Jess, is that the mind's desires are insatiable. And on top of that, they lack dimension and direction. They can go anywhere, take you towards anything. Remember, those stimuli are always coming in. It's not that you can put on blinkers and avoid looking anywhere. Okay, you're out minding your own business and all of a sudden the neighbor pops out. Not literally pops out, but I mean is outside. So that's a stimuli. Now, a person with no intellect succumbing to the desires of the mind slowly allows that thought flow to develop. Start running to that object, or in this case, being. That establishes an attachment, that establishes a desire. So now you're in a position when you are desiring something that is not meant for you. Inappropriate. See, if the intellect is present, what happens is you stop, you check. Why am I desiring this? What has it got to do with me? Is this an obligation? Do I need to interact with this person or not? This is something that the intellect is able to do. It is able to discern between what is obligation and what is forbidden. This is what we call being objective to a desire. See, there might be a desire for interaction. There might be a desire for company. Whatever that desire is, the intellect must check it. And this is the role of the intellect in any desire. See, it's one thing to simply pursue the desire. And this is exactly what happens in the poem. This pursuit of the desire. And he gives it another example. So just coming back to that verse, he's trying and trying and trying, not meant for him. Why are the pineapples in a frame? Because they're not meant for the bee. Why are those desires? They are there. The stimuli, the sense objects, they're all there. But we need to discern what is for us and what is not. Now, what happens is we are unable to discern, so we pursue things not meant for us and waste half the day. A bee has only got a few days. So how this pertains to we waste half our lifetime pursuing things we don't, or that are not meant for us. Desire is not meant for us. Then we later find out, oh, the whole time I've been doing this wrong. And you trim your flight another way. What's the other way? Vedanta. So this is the poet draws his conclusion. Methinks I said in thee I find the sin and madness of mankind. To joys forbidden man aspires, consumes his soul with vain desires. He sums it up. The sin and madness of mankind. So what happens, and we'll just read this next poem. Folly the spring of his pursuit, and disappointment all the fruit. While Cynthia ogles as she passes, the nymph between two chariot glasses. So now he's giving an actual example. Folly is a silliness, weakness of the mind, as it were. Now he gives another example of this pursuit. Cynthia ogles as she passes, the nymph between two chariot glasses. She is a pineapple, and he the silly, unsuccessful bee. So again, this is exactly what we were talking about. Coveting something that is not meant for you. So there's a desire. Cynthia ogles. Ogles, the thought starts going as we described. Lack of intellect, thought starts going towards that object. So there's the desire takes hold of him, and he starts pining away for that woman in this case. In the chariot glasses means there's a barrier. Again, what he's implying is that is not meant for him. Every nice guy you see driving in a nice car, oh, is that for me? So he's referring to these desires again, not meant for one. Folly the spring of his pursuit, and disappointment all the fruit. This is what he says. So you get dejected, you get disappointment when you cannot meet the desires. So what he's essentially talking about here is this indulgence. So we see this indulgence. This is ogling. This is what he means by ogling. While Cynthia ogles as she passes. Now this ogling, this indulgence is not necessarily a physical indulgence. You know, you think of indulgence as, okay, I've got a block of chocolate and nobody's around, and it's a movie night, and actually I'm going to eat the whole thing. We're not talking about that kind of indulgence. What we're talking about is indulgence at the mental level. So what happens in indulgence is you linger in the thought of that particular object or being, whether you have it or not. This lingering further strengthens the desire. This is what you don't realize. The more you entertain that thought, the more you indulge that thought. This is what he means by indulgence. The more you indulge that thought, the stronger the desire becomes. And then what happens? Well, one of two things, and this is what he highlights in the next thing. So you're lingering, you keep on entertaining that desire, ogles as she passes. So one of two things happen. He says, while Cynthia ogles as she passes a nymph between two chariot glasses, she is a pineapple and he the silly unsuccessful bee. The maid who views with pensive air the show glass fraught with glittering ware, sees watches, bracelets, rings, and lockets, but sighs at thoughts of empty pockets. Like thine, her appetite is keen, but the cruel glass between. So here we go. The one person is indulging that thought. Okay, now you're strengthening that desire. And then this is the first thing, like the lady. She has that desire. She's looking at the bracelets. She knows she can't afford it, but the desire is being entertained. So what does this lead to? It leads to a sense of deprivation. It leads to a sense of unfulfillment. It leads to a sense of unhappiness. Can't have that. I can't get that. So your whole life you spend in this poor me sort of attitude. I'm one of those have-nots. Why? Because you're allowing that desire to linger. You're encouraging that thought without having the means to support it. See, there may be nothing wrong with that thought. For someone who can afford it, what's to go and look for a new watch, or what's to go and buy a new ring? Nothing wrong with that. It's a desire. I have a desire to wear some jewelry. That's okay. I'll go out and buy some and fulfill that desire. Again, there's nothing wrong in fulfilling the desires, but what you should always appreciate is, and this is where knowledge aspect starts coming in, which we'll discuss at the end. What you should understand is that, yes, you are at liability. We're human beings, right? This is the bottom line. We are human beings, and we have desires. This is the nature of being human. We have desires. Now, what you must appreciate is that in simply fulfilling desires, we are not necessarily getting any closer to an absolute state of happiness. If you recognize that, then it's fine. You can entertain desires. Okay, I'll get this. But I know it's not going to bring me any greater sense of peace and happiness in the long term. You appreciate that. But it's okay. It's nice to have nice things, and that's the kind of lifestyle I want for myself. So you allow that entertainment. This is the role the intellect plays. Okay, I'm permitting myself that particular desire. Now, what you have to line that up with is again the pursuit of this desire bringing me any closer to a sense of well-being? Is it helping me in my attempt to develop myself, to further myself? This is again the role the intellect plays. If the intellect says, hey, hang on, no, you by doing this, you're merely flaming the desires. Remember, the desires in the mind in particular is likened to fire. And fire's nature is such as that it consumes. It goes on consuming. So you got to be on your best guard, as it were, in that this is the nature of the mind. This is the mind's tendency to want to acquire, to want to desire. And those desires are insatiable. They never stop. Only the intellect can deem whether it is something worthwhile pursuing or not. See, at the end of the day, most of the time we just will fulfill the desires. This is a fructification of a desire, is the action in fulfilling it. But if you appreciate and understand it, that it cannot necessarily bring you a greater sense of well-being, then you slowly begin understanding the futility of its pursuit. So he brings into this last idea, but sighs at thoughts of empty pockets, like thine her appetite is keen, but the cruel glass between. So going back, you linger in these desires, you're creating this indulgence, you're wanting the desire. Now you either have the means to fulfill that want, you either have the means to fulfill that desire, or you're disappointed. But sighs at thoughts of empty pockets. Miserable. You go through life being miserable, unable to control the desires for one, and then not being able to fulfill them. The other thing that happens is you have the desires, you're unable to fulfill them, you're lingering in that desire, and the desire exerts such a strong force or pressure on the personality that it almost pushes you out to obtain that particular object or being. This is what he says at the end when he says, with hopeless wish one looks and lingers, one breaks the glass and cuts his fingers. This is one of the outcomes of this mental indulgence in desire. You cut your fingers. Why? Because you pursue something again that is not meant for you, unable to discern between obligation and forbidden. So, clearly highlighting the nature of one's desires. You indulge, you linger, you can't fulfill, you're disappointed, or you go and do something inappropriate. You end up landing in hot water, as it were. So our dear delights are often such. Delights here are desires. He's just highlighting the nature. This is the nature of desires. Our dear delights are often such. Exposed to view, but not to touch. Exposed to view in the sense the stimuli are all around us. You can't go through life and close yourself in a room and not contact the world. This is not only foolish, but it's also impractical. It's not trying to remove yourself from stimuli that makes you spiritually astute. It's not trying to not see certain things, not hear certain things. No. I don't take that particular drink. It's too much sugar. I don't do sweetness. So this is often the mistake that one encounters on the spiritual pursuit. You think that it is restricting yourself, getting away from all those negativities, as it were. No, I shouldn't see such things. I shouldn't hear such things. I shouldn't be around such things. This is an impractical approach. This is not something that I would recommend. And I don't think it, as far as I can tell, there's nothing that the scriptures recommend. In fact, you are a human being. You are in the world. Okay, to an extent, of course, we can limit the amount, we can limit certain stimuli that are not productive. Okay, for sure, that's understandable. But what I'm saying is we can't put ourselves in a room and completely just not contact the world. Okay, bad example, because that's exactly what's happening now. We're stuck in our houses and we can't go anywhere. But we got the internet, so you can go anywhere, actually. You want to go to Hawaii, I'm sure there's a live stream somewhere. So in that sense, it is a good example. So the point is you cannot shut down all the stimuli around you. It's impractical. So you have these stimuli coming in. So he says, yeah, exposed to view, but not to touch. What determines whether you can or can't touch it is the intellect. Is this an obligation I have to fulfill a particular desire? Is this something that is forbidden? Or is it something in between? Now, if it is something in between, this is okay. The intellect sanctions that. Okay. Neither forbidden, obligation for sure, we understand you should do. Falls in between, okay. And this is usually the range. You see, this is actually the problem. Because obligations is clear. I should fulfill that. Okay, and my kids need to go to school. Yes, I will have to take them. I will fulfill that desire to provide for my children. Whatever, there's certain obligations you yourself have set up for yourself. Then it's clear, I'm acting in line with my obligations. Often the case, things forbidden, also quite clear for someone with an intellect. A lot of times for someone without an intellect, not very clear. But the main scope is those things that lie in the middle. Now, should I contact this or shouldn't I? This is the dilemma of choice, which is this massive scope that lies in between forbidden and obligation. Exposed to view, but not to touch. So when you are exposed to these things, the desires pop up. Then you have to say, okay, is it worth contacting or not? This is what we've already discussed. Should I contact this desire or not? Okay, you decide to contact the desire. Now, the way to contact that desire is through regulation, moderation. This is the best form of contact in any desire. If you want to enjoy it, that best form of contact is in moderation, regulation. So we understand, okay, we have these certain desires. Okay, well, I have to contact them for the time being. I understand. So when I contact them, I will do it carefully with a certain regulation and moderation. So exposed to view, but not to touch. You must be able to distinguish and discern what is for you, what is not for you, and how to contact the particular desire. The sight our foolish heart inflames. A fool implies this is no intellect. This is exactly what happens when the mind takes over the personality. The sight, you just see something, and that heart inflames means the desire is encouraged. This indiscriminate thought flow is established. It runs towards that object or being. We long for pineapples and frames. We long to fulfill those desires that may not be meant for us. With hopeless wish, one looks and lingers. We've covered this. When you have no means to fulfill it. And this might not just refer to wealth. You, for instance, want a following, Instagram. No one's clicking, no one likes, no likes. With hopeless wish, what can you do? What can you do? So one of the things is with hopeless wish means there's dejection. The other thing is one breaks the glass and cuts his fingers. So it goes all out in obtaining that desire. That's not meant for it and gets into trouble. Then he ends it off, and this is the greatness of the poem. But they whom truth and wisdom lead can gather honey from a weed. See, a person that is wise, this is the opposite of folly, in fact. It's the very opposite of folly. So if you're being led by truth and wisdom, all it means is you've understood the higher values of life. So you're able to gather honey from a weed means that you're able to gain a sense of satisfaction independent of circumstances. Whether the circumstance is good, whether the circumstance is bad, whether it's comme ci, comme ça, you are able to maintain a sense of satisfaction. You always got a smile on your face. In adverse situations, in positive situations, irrelevant really. It doesn't matter to you because you are smiling because of an inner happiness, independent of the objects and beings, situations and circumstances, weather, family, anything. You are happy. That is an inner sense of happiness. So it's this dependency, in fact, that is the problem. And this comes because of ignorance. So the question is, how do we break that dependency? We become independent. We break the dependency of relying on objects and beings around us for our own sense of well-being through the attainment of knowledge and wisdom, those whom truth and wisdom leads. Essentially, truth is just having correct knowledge on how the world functions and my relationship to it. This is Vedanta. This is exactly what Vedanta is doing. It is educating you on the correct values of life, the correct approach to life and living, by understanding oneself and by understanding the world in which one interacts. So those whom truth and wisdom lead can gather honey from a weed. William Cowper. Okay, so that is about all I have to say for now. I've allotted a little bit of time here at the end. If anybody has any questions pertaining to what we've discussed, you can put your question in the chat, or you can put your hand up, or you can unmute yourself, depending on your preference. Yes, Brenda, putting up a real hand, not a virtual hand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Craig, how do we, in these trying times with so much noise and chaos out there, how do we shut off from that without isolating and imprisoning ourselves? I mean, we're already isolated, but like emotionally, how do we deal with this? Especially if we're so sensitive to what's going on out there, and the negativity and the way we're being led, and it's all very overwhelming.
So it's quite a common sort of, not a common question, but it's a common tone that I've noticed in a lot of people, and the first thing I say to them is, what is actually going on outside? Okay, it's not that we don't need to be completely uninformed, right? To the extent you need to be informed, to that extent you can engage with information, right?
Yeah.
Now, what we have a tendency, and this is what I've noticed happening in a lot of people, there's no real need for you to be overloaded with such a lot of information. And bearing in mind that we are living in an age of information and technology. So there's a vast amount of intelligence available to us. And on any one day, I could receive 10 COVID-19 videos, 14 COVID-19 articles, Now, if I have to sit and go through all of those and read every article and then get on the phone, and I knew anyone ever talks about now is COVID-19, I have 15 conversations with even I will be at the end of the day spinning in my own room, So yeah. This is what I said. To the extent you can limit the stimuli, what has this got to do with me? So, okay, these guys are working on something there, and this is happening in China, and this is happening here, and what has it got to do with me? How's that affecting me? Okay, government has a role. Government role is to implement policies to protect its people. Now, whether I agree or disagree on how the government is handling the situation is not the point. You are chosen to be a citizen of this country, and therefore you need to abide by the certain laws and regulations that the government has placed on you. So the one thing I've sort of encouraged people to do is, first of all, limit that stimuli. This is what I was saying in the beginning. You have the ability to limit a certain flow of stimuli. You don't have to click every link. You don't have to watch every video. You don't have to hear every story. rather focus on, okay, this is a time that is difficult, no doubt. We're faced with many challenges, whether it's, you know, a job or whether it's having to interact with someone at home. And trust, there's always someone worse off than you. This is one thing. Always someone worse off than you. But in order to ground yourself, the best thing is to focus on what needs to be done at the particular time. That requires the participation of the intellect. Okay. And this goes for any time, of any year, of any age, not just now. Your actions should be based on what your obligations are. And your obligations, you determine yourself. So, for instance, you may still be working. What is my obligation? Okay, my obligation is to perform this much work each day. That's what I have to do. And you focus on that. Otherwise, what the mind, and even the mind has a tendency, this is a desire for knowledge, intellectual desire, wants to go out, information. Where can I get the next bit of information from? Intellectual desire. It's still a desire. Bask in triple rows. Is it meant for me? Okay, I need to know about that because, yes, I don't want to, I'm interacting with the public. I can't be sitting at home and not knowing anything. So to an extent, I know what's going on around me. But that's personally, I'm in the public eye. Now, a friend of mine actually, he was in Cape Town. And, you know, I've noticed everyone has got caught up in this thing. Very caught up, and everyone's got an opinion, and one either sits on the side of the fence or that's, I've taken this stance, I've taken that stance, and that's fine, you know. But it's the mind that gets caught up, and then the mind gets agitated. So what happened, and this is a great example, this friend of mine, he was in Cape Town and obviously being barraged, a flood of information all the time on what else is there to do, get on the internet, get on my phone. I said, he said, I've got an opportunity to go to Tsikama to work on a farm. I said, go. He went. He's been there 5 days. This guy is as happy as anything. I said, what's going on? He's like, I don't even know anymore what's going on, you know. I'm phoning you for information. You know what I mean? He's distanced himself from that stimulus. He doesn't need to. How's it going to make a difference whether we're in zone level 4 or level 3? Zero difference from 5 to 4. So what difference 4 to 3? Doesn't matter. You know, you get on with doing what you have to do. And this is exactly the stance he's taken. Just doing what he has to. You got some work there. He's doing the work. Okay. Hi, Craig. What's happening out in the world? And I don't give him a little bit what he needs to know. Oh, you know, you can actually go and buy a pair of shorts online now. Because I knew he wanted some shorts. You can buy shorts online now. Oh, thanks. That's all I need to know. So what pertains to you? This is important. What stimuli am I going to entertain? What stimuli am I going to encourage? If there's no filtration system, you're just bombarded. That bombardment is the feeling of being overwhelmed. You get overwhelmed in the situation because you're taking on too much, unnecessarily. So again, it's employing this filtration system. That filtration system is the intellect. Do I entertain? Do I not? Should I encourage? Should I not? If you're unsure, err on the side of caution. Always err on the side of caution. Okay?
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, that really helps. And yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Great. Okay, any other questions, whether verbal or written?
So, Craig, kind of second to that, you know, you were saying with your friend who was feeling really overwhelmed, and when he completely removed himself from the situation, he immediately felt better. So that works for a while. You know, I think one of the positives of all this staying at home is a lot of that noise is gone, which allows us maybe to think about better things and more positive things, unless of course you're sitting watching the news all day, which is a depressing thing to do. So, you know, even like alcoholics, you know, when part of their treatment is to totally cut it out, it's not, there's no capacity to discern, you know, I can have one drink but more is too much for me. So how do you find that balance? You know, if the intellect is still developing, to cut things out as much as you can, but you have to at some point introduce them again. Otherwise, you know, we have to all go back out into the world and all the noise starts again. So to try and find that balance, any tips there or questions to ask to, you know, I think of one of the poems where you were talking about the circular reasoning. It's very easy to get stuck in that, to feel like you've thought about something and then go on, yes, that is a good idea, but it may actually not have truly been the intellect making that decision. So just to find that balance from totally cutting it out to, you know, a healthy balance.
So, so when we say cutting it out, and this is one of the approaches, even in you'll notice even in an acute situation. So say you're having a blowout, an argument with somebody, and you're overwhelmed and you hyped up, and the desire and the feeling and the emotion is there, and what they say, even in that, remove yourself from the situation. If you can't manage yourself, remove yourself from the situation. Say, hang on, I just need to go outside for 2 minutes. You go outside, you drink a glass of water, let everything settle a bit. Okay, but you got to go back inside. This is your point. You got to go back inside. You got to still deal with the situation. Now, what Vedanta is saying is, okay, you have these things that you're dealing with, and maybe sometimes you can't deal with them, so you isolate yourself, right? Now, mere isolation will not work, because you can't do it indefinitely. So what it says is, you remove yourself from the situation, and in that removal process, while you are removed from a situation, while you're removed from noise, you need to fortify yourself. Fortify yourself, fortify yourself. This we understand as the study. Every day, regulated dose of study. Getting to the bottom of these ideas and concepts, reflecting. That's the fortification process. So now when you go out into the world, there's still going to be noise, but you fortified yourself to an extent that you can deal with a certain degree of the noise. Everyone has a limit. Everyone has a capacity. Everyone is working themselves to a certain degree. Some more than others, some less than others. So you go out and now you're able to go, okay, I'm much better than I was, but I've still got some way to go. So again, what happens? You isolate. You go out, you meet, you recognize, you understand where you are, where you lie, weaknesses. Okay, I still got to work on this. Still too much noise. And again, you go back, isolate. Find that peaceful time. This is why we recommend the morning. Find that peaceful time, because there's no noise. Only noise that can be there at that time in the morning is in your head, and that is reduced. This is why we recommend it so much. Again, fortify, fortify, fortify. Go out. You're able to deal with a greater amount of noise. So it's not just isolation. It's not just withdrawing without any fortification. It's a withdrawal, including fortification. This is the technique. So it's like a pedal on a bicycle. So as one withdraws, he must put in the knowledge. Withdrawal, knowledge. Withdrawal, knowledge. And then you'll find that the personality, the strength in the character and personality increases slowly, till eventually you get to a point where you can be in the middle of Times Square and not be affected by the noise at all. And this is the point we're trying to get to. You can't ever be in a situation where there's no noise. Impossible, unless you go to the Himalayas or unless you go deep sea dive. But otherwise, there will be a noise around you. So it's hard to deal with that noise around you. And that comes through fortifying yourself. So the noise is still there, but you're unaffected by the noise because you're objective. And this is the main, this is one of the fundamental values that Vedanta gives you, is this ability to maintain objectivity. Objectivity towards your own actions, objectivity towards your own desires, objectivity towards the people you meet, your preconceived biases and ideas. You're objective to that. Once you're objective, then you have no problem in life. It's like being an actor on a stage. whatever role you have to perform it to the best of your ability, knowing full well that you have nothing to do with that actor, somewhere else.
Perfect.
Okay?